Okay, it looks like Anita's got the live stream up and running. Looks like we've got most everybody here. So Josh is driving, and to have him pay attention to driving, I shall call the roll. And just go ahead and say you're present. Josh K.
Present.
Linda Nishioka, present. Tyson Geeson. I don't see him yet. Scott Hausner.
Hausner, present.
Summer Knightley. Vincenzo Maduri.
Here.
Thank you. Alan is out. Quandary Robertson.
Here.
Summer is here. I see her. She's just muted. Summer, are you able to unmute and acknowledge your?
Sorry about that. Present.
Thank you. Kirk Sund.
Present.
And welcome. I think
Thank you.
we'll probably have an introduction here momentarily. Jordan Truitt.
Present.
Thank you, Jordan. And Charles Weathers.
Present.
Thank you. All right, so roll call. So Josh, do you want me to move forward?
Sure. No, I'm just settling in. I'm opening the door here, and
Okay, all
I
right.
guess we got the introduction of our new board member, Kirk Sund. Kirk, welcome. Tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you, Josh. I turned my video on, but my internet is super slow right now for some reason, so I apologize. But I grew up in Salem, went to South Salem High School, went to University of Oregon for architecture. I'm the managing principal at CB2 Architects. So some of you may know Aaron Turpinine, your past board member who just went off. He's one of my business partners. I was excited to join the DAB board and look for opportunities to help liven and increase the viability of the future of downtown Salem. So thank you.
Well, we're excited to have you here, Kirk, with your expertise and your local and institutional knowledge. It's just only gonna better our perspective as a collective board here. So thank you for the awesome intro. Moving on to board business. I would ask, unless there's any questions for an approval of our agenda today.
I would move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Scott.
Charles seconds that.
Charles seconds. Thank you. All those in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Those not,
Aye.
nay. Motion carries. We have an approved agenda. And now the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on January 27th. I ask for a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Second.
In a second. All right, all those in favor of approval of the minutes from January 27th meeting, say aye.
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 Those
Aye.
not, nay. Motion carries. We have approved minutes. Now to the meat of the potatoes here. Action items. A, does Downtown Advisory Board recommend agency board approval of the proposed 2022-23 Riverfront Downtown Urban Renewal Budget? Let's open that up for discussion. Sheree?
I did want to point out a change from the first one that you saw last time, the draft, to this one that you're approving. Alan Pollock brought it to our attention. In the old one, it had under actual 2021 ending fund balance of 11 million, but what was carried over to the next didn't match it. It was 18 million and not 11 million. So in the one that you have today, that was corrected. So you have the 18,656,606 that was carried over to 21, 22. You see the 18, 656, well, 605, close enough. But basically, the focus in the draft was for this year's budget that we're working on. But we did want to make that correction since Alan brought it to our attention. Otherwise, everything's the same as you saw at the last meeting and that we discussed. Anybody have any questions? I mean, it's basically, since we didn't have any alterations to last budget, there's really no other change as far as we still have the funding at the levels of which you saw at the last meeting.
No questions here. We spent considerable time on it last time, and good catch, Alan.
Yeah, good catches, right? So I move that we approve this budget as presented today.
I second.
Okay. All those in favor of the approval of the downtown Riverfront, or excuse me, Riverfront Downtown Urban Renewal Budget, say aye.
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 Those not, nay. Motion carries. We have an approved budget.
Thank you.
Go with it, Cherie, go with it.
Thank
Go for
you.
it.
I'm not in Hawaii, Linda, come on. And thank you for not showing us the outside with the palm trees.
Yeah, I'm showing you a blood ball or something, I don't know.
Well, let's move forward now to information reports. The overview of the draft 2022-23 downtown parking fund budget.
So I think most of you have been on the board. Well, there's a couple of you that are brand new, but I have been queuing up and sharing information on this moment with you for a while. I gave you an early heads up. We've had a couple of conversations in regards to the parking fund is broken. The model of the parking district is broken. You can see, I mean, last year, those of you that were on the board, we ended up, when we had this meeting, not being able to even really talk about it because we had a $300,000 shortfall. And my recommendation was not to approve something that wasn't balanced. So it came back to us at the next meeting with an infusion of ARPA funds that balanced us out. But basically, it only covered those basic costs to operate the district. We historically had been talking each year about there's expenses and then there's revenues, and we were looking at minimal increases on an annual basis to parking permits, even if it was $2 to try to do something with that every year. But the impacts of COVID last year really, the permits went down because people were working remotely. So that really, usually you don't increase unless you have a demand that allows you to increase. We certainly didn't have that. Last year, our permit revenue is up a little bit this year because the construction permits are part of our resource. And with all the construction that's been going on, we had Coe's last year, and this year we have the Holman Hotel, and those are $75 to $150 a month that for a monthly construction permit. So that has helped our revenue. But the bottom line is, this has been trending the wrong way For years, we've been talking about switching the model to a paid parking system in downtown. I think that that is something that the board will continue to want to have ongoing discussions with Counselor Stapleton about in regards to, since she's going to be joining us on a quarterly basis. That'll be something that you're going to want to keep, reminding her that you want as a board for council to consider moving that forward. But, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'll state again, like I did a couple meetings back, there are things that we have not done for quite a while because the district has not had revenue to do that. And I'll give you a list of kind of what they are because I went over them with my boss so that she could raise the concerns of this budget at a higher level, because having $2,900 really isn't enough of a cushion for anybody's budget. So the things that I keep in mind that we have not done is that we haven't done district-wide sidewalk power washing 7 years. Even though businesses and property owners are responsible for keeping the sidewalks clean, it used to be that we would at least once a year clean all the sidewalks, power wash them. It is a challenge because a lot of the buildings do not have water spigots on the outside of their building to make it easy to power wash. But just keep that in mind when you look at the sidewalks. That's contributing to the look and feel. We used to sweep the alleys. A vehicle would come through and sweep the alleys. We would alternate those. That hasn't been done 8 years. Obviously, we've been talking about the trash receptacles in the past. Most of them now have a lot of graffiti on them. And even though the graffiti people come through and cover it up within 24 hours, the graffiti's back on it, but they haven't been repowder coated, thoroughly cleaned, new locks put on them, broken springs on the doors. None of that's been done since they were put in, which was before the downtown parking fund came to me. So I don't really know how long ago that was. And Rebecca and I are working on finding some replacements for the trash cans, because we don't want to have to wait until all the streetscapes done to get some better equipment out there. So the goal would be we'll put it out there now, and then when we hit streetscape in that particular block, we would remove it and put it back. But we need some new trash containers. We've already talked about the landscape maintenance. We talked about that in regards to Riverfront. Hard to put in new landscaping when there's no money in parking fund to keep it up. Same with the capital costs in the parking structures. This year, we're putting some of those costs into Riverfront. The goal was always to have the parking fund be self-sufficient. It would generate enough to cover whatever the costs are to operate the district. We haven't had hanging flower baskets for several years now. We haven't been able to fund any of the holiday lighting things. We did try to do banners for a while and get those up and take it down. But again, you don't see anything in the budget for that. Those of you that know me know this is a really hard conversation for me on a whole bunch of levels, because it is just so broken. People want security. There's, we used to try to put a little bit in here for holiday security. That's, not happening. We've had no money really for art, promotion, events, marketing, any of the things that I know, Josh, you were talking about how great it would be if we could bring some of that back. We have community partners who've tried to keep that going for us bit by bit. appreciate them doing that. But I'm sure it's hard for them to get people to rally around and give money when the rest of what we have going on downtown doesn't really support it. Obviously, if there's a broken bench, typically there's no money to fix it. It just basically gets removed depending on how much they're broken. So again, I'm happy to talk or provide any background that I can, but we've been pretty consistently discussing that we were going to be in this moment. So I guess for me, my piece for you guys has been, I've been talking about this here with my boss. I know that she raised it with the rest of the department heads because it will have to be addressed at a level higher, than us, as far as I don't have any magic wand to come up with money to, to fill in here. So I see Kristen's on here, but I know she knows how I feel about this, and I know that she's been raising it. Do you have anything to share on that, Kristen?
I can share that, we're starting the city budget process. We just had a budget offsite 4-hour meeting with our leadership team to talk about general fund budget. And while this is not directly related to general fund budget, it kind of is. And that kind of piece is the $200,000 that has been used to support the downtown team. And because of a variety of reasons, including retirements, challenges in hiring, budget for additional police officers, COVID impacts. So all of these different things, and supporting homeless camp cleanups. The downtown team is rarely downtown anymore. They're assigned to other work throughout the city. So, part of our conversation then was, do we need to look at not using this funding for police services anymore? Do we need to look at shifting it to security rather than police, which is a path that I don't know if there's anybody here that was around back in the day when we used to have security. That predated me. But at one time we did use these funds to support security and then shifted it to police services. So it might be the time to look at shifting it back to security. $200,000 for police officers doesn't go very far. We are in a time period, not just with this fund, but with the general fund in general, where, I don't know how many of you were at State of the City yesterday, but, we need 60 new officers. We need new fire apparatus and engine crews. So our general fund life safety service needs are very significant. We also have very high community expectations to be investing in services to address homelessness. So we've been doing that through service provision, and we've had a lot of general fund money that's gone into that. We also have a lot of general fund money that it's harder to put a direct number to that because it's been opportunity cost. So every time we send out a crew to respond to cleaning up an area, and that crew generally consists of folks from code enforcement, folks from the housing authority, police, and parks crews, there's a cost for the day or 2 days or 3 days that those individuals aren't able to do their normal work assignment. So as we're moving through the city's budget process, we're going to be looking at whether or not we should use general fund resources to fund a kind of what we call a rapid response team that will be dedicated staff just for those services. That's at a trade-off with funding more police to respond to criminal activity, or more fire staff to respond to medical or fire emergencies. So, it'll be those sorts of trade-offs that the policymakers will be making as we move through this spring. With regard to this fund being broken, we had a model that changed. I don't know, when did the cap go in, Sheree? 10 years ago, 9 years ago?
2013.
Okay, so not quite 10 years ago. And we have seen revenues struggle and not keep up with inflation year to year. And then a tremendous impact, and we were already having challenges before COVID, then significantly more of an impact with COVID, with losing major employers and with the number of people that aren't paying their tax, the amount of bad debt write-off that we've had, all of that. So we've known that there would be a time when we would need to shift to a paid system. I think we have a council at this point in time that's really interested in doing that. But it ties into a couple of other things in terms of the timing of moving forward with that. So one of those things is that the climate action plan addresses paid on-street parking downtown. The climate action plan, the cities that has come out of the task force, it has this sort of dotted line connection to a larger initiative through the state, through the Department of State Lands. They're developing and will be coming out very soon. I mean, with their drafts are already out there of rulemaking that will be statewide. And some of that crosses over our own climate action items that we have developed. So in terms of rolling out our piece, we're right now watching what's happening at the state level because we don't want to get down the path with implementing the recommendations from our action plan and then have 3 months, 6 months, the state rulemaking get wrapped up and say, oh, well, you're kind of on the right path, but we really need you to take a sharp left and go this direction with implementation. So there's going to be some monitoring of what happens at the state, implementing things from our strategy that we think aren't going to be included in the state piece, but parking is going to be a big part of the state piece. So we need to watch what happens there and let that inform how we implement any changes to parking in Salem. So we've got that piece going on. And the second big piece is we are working to develop a $300 million infrastructure bond that would support things like affordable housing, roads and bridges, new fire apparatus. It's a pretty big ask and a long list of things. The reason that the timing for that is important now is our last big bond is going to be coming off the tax bill. If we move forward with the bond now for the taxpayers, it will be a flat line. And so the timing right now to have no new impact to our citizens is to move forward with this within the next year. If we delay that, then we're going to have that last bond come off the property taxes to move forward would then come back as a new increase to citizens. So we try to keep that stabilized so it's not a hit to anybody. So knowing that this is going to be a big bond ask and cover a lot of things, there's also concern about fatigue out there in the community and overload in terms of what folks can process, because there has been, so we've got a big council election where we will have, four councilors and a mayor being elected. We will have the bond. We've got, climate action stuff that we're working through. There's a lot going on coming out of a pandemic. And so the other piece with parking then is, do we move forward with a paid system now and have that impact a council election or derail a council election and become politicized? Same thing's true for a bond measure. Or do we wait until the fall and then start focusing, because then we will know what the state rules are and what the impact's going to be to parking. Because the state stuff isn't going to be just downtown, that's going to have citywide impacts. So we're trying to balance all of these different things as we think through the best timing for implementing a paid system downtown, knowing that we have this really big budget crunch. And then how do we offset that budget crunch for a year or two? And is the solution to that to stop funding police, which then ripples through and creates general fund impacts elsewhere and service elsewhere, and shift that money, some of that, to security downtown? Or do we leave it status quo for now and just have a really, really bad ending fund balance for the next year? So those are all the different things that we're discussing and weighing and trying to figure out what is going to be, I'm not even going to say the best solution, because we don't have a best solution right now. You know, we have some different paths and options. And I think right now it's what is going to be, in some ways, the least harmful solution for the next 12 to 24 months until we get through all of these other big pieces, climate action plan, council, all of these different things that are going to be occurring during that same window. So there's just a lot there for the community to be absorbing right now.
Kristen, thank you. That's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
And a lot on the table. I want to go back to Cherie's portion and open it up, but I've been hearing since I've known you, Cherie, a consistent theme of your frustrations. I mean, you're out there at 5 a.m. in some cases doing the jobs of others as the downtown revitalization manager. I mean, you're so impressive, and you've been saying this, and I just feel, here I am sitting here on DAB as chair, and I am hearing this, and everything's political, obviously. I mean, we've known about the parking budget for years, and we've just been kicking the can down the road, and we've known it's been broken. It's just sad that it has to become optics and political when we know the solution is there. But it would be so great to get a list, or I don't know what formal process there is of what is wrong. For example, you go on State Street and you have to walk where you're stepping because you don't want to step in feces, whether it's from the pigeons or it's from the dogs or elsewhere. So to hear that we can't even get the support for power washing the streets is just a shame. And I don't want to focus on what's wrong. I just want to focus on solutions. But what's the path to, for example, the low-hanging fruit for a distribution of resources to take care of a simple cleaning of the streets and for people to feel comfortable walking? And I want to set public safety aside too. That's a big one.
Well, Josh, thank you. And I have been lucky that I have had amazing advisory board members who have always made me feel supported. So I thank you all for that. The pigeon poo, thank goodness it's not human waste, but the pigeon poo on State Street in front of 239, I sent a letter to that property owner, just like I send a letter to the property owner that owns a corner. I don't know if they always know, but unfortunately that awning where the pigeons are, it's so far out into the sidewalk that there is no place unless you're just about in the street to get around that pigeon poo. So just know things like that I see, I do try to get this is my thing. And I do not understand why a business, because there are two businesses right there, why they would not go to their landlord or why they would not clean that up instead of having their customers walk over that is beyond me. Some businesses, I mean, you could eat off the sidewalk. Their pride, they would not ever be satisfied with a certain look and without having a certain look and feel. That is not the case. One of the reasons why we had to implement a clean team was because there was an inconsistency of how things were being kept up by a business, not just those that had a vacancy, but by businesses that actually were open for business. In a perfect world, it'd be great if, you know, like when you go to New York or some of the cities, in the morning, the shop owners are out there and they're, you know, immaculately keeping everything clean. For whatever the reason, we don't have that. But some of those things I do try to apply. I'm the city, you know, did you know that you had, it would be nice if you would clean it up. But yeah, no, it is disappointing on multiple levels that it will take everybody to make the change. That, I mean,
Sure.
the homelessness issue, I mean, Kristen, from the beginning, you've talked about the city can't do it alone. It takes a lot of agencies and voices and volunteers and religious community. But it's still spiraling right now for whatever the reason. And again, I'm leery to fix certain things because just like with the graffiti, within 24 hours, it's right back on it. And so is it, you know, you're paying every time you have it and you don't get any long-term benefit from it. And then we'll be right back to where we are now. We don't have any money. I buy new and they get broken and then I don't have money again to replace it for a long time. So it's a balancing act, but again,
Sure.
I'm lucky to have a great boss who lets me, you know, get emotional on this budget right now. And I know she will do her best to help us in any way we can, but it's gonna, I mean, some of the businesses and property owners are gonna have to help us with keeping things clean right now too. So.
Well, thank you. And I certainly don't intend to pick on anyone individually. It was just an illustration there of one example.
It's a perfect one.
Yeah. And, you know, I just think it might be unrealistic to think that you put it on the business owners. I think there's a balancing act too of the city stepping in and just taking care of the things that they know inevitably are going to not get left by the wayside. You know, we talk about the weight of this past couple of years and, you know, maybe sweeping off or power washing off if they can find a hose spigot at the front of their storefront is the last thing on their mind when they're trying to make payroll or trying to figure out how to get people in the door with no office workers downtown patronizing their businesses to the level we've seen in the past. And we all hope we get back there. I just want to focus on the solution. I think DAB is an important role. And I think if there's any way that we can get a structured, cohesive, palatable, if you will, one pager of just the things that you've identified for years. Every time we come around these budget conversations, I guess I'm tired of, and I know you are too, of not having that fixed and dealt with. I think that there's a little bit of a fracture of the downtown with the relationship with the city, and there's so much great investment going on downtown, the park and the hotel, and tenants moving in, and vacancies, you know, never been shorter or less with downtown vacancy ratings. So it'd just be great to see some of these things get solved. I don't want to keep taking up the air though. Please, somebody jump in.
I'll keep buying my Powerball ticket, Josh.
Burkett has his hand up.
Yeah, I wanted a couple follow-up questions kind of to what Josh and Sri are both asking. So I think it would be great to get a list of those items or projects that are potentially low-hanging fruit that could provide a lot of value or visual value to residents and, you know, shop owners and tenants downtown. The other, kind of touched on it, Kristen, is the $200,000 for the police. I'm wondering, would we be able to get a proposal from a security service to understand what this $200,000 get? And then as we weigh this, maybe 175,000 gets us what we're wanting, and then there's some value in 25,000 moving to street cleaning or beautification of some sort off the list that Cherie's kind of brought up that could help us move some of these budget items around.
Oh, sorry, Kirk.
Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, part of the discussion about security is whether or not it's better for that to be a contracted service, because we did that over the last couple of years using ARPA funds. And there were a lot of challenges with having a contracted service. We weren't getting the presence and the results that we thought that we would get. So do we try that again? Or do we make this a paid city position where we've got more control? So that's part of the discussion that the city leadership team is having. Regardless of whether or not those funds come from the parking fund or from the general fund, then it's then a question of, is it a contracted service or is it staff that we can have more discretion in how we deploy them and how we schedule them. So that is going to be an ongoing discussion with the leadership team as we're developing budget recommendations over the next month. The second piece, in terms of if we took 100,000 or 125 or 150 or whatever that number is of the parking fund revenue and move that to security, wherever that lands, then those remaining funds, then how would we spend those within the district? So then there's that question of, do we keep those as reserves in case there is something that comes up that's a structural sort of issue where we would need those resources, or something else that's unanticipated? So do we just keep it as a set aside, or do we use this to augment the clean team and increase cleaning services? Do we use it for some other type of beautification? So yeah, so I think that we could come forward with whether that amounts, 50,000 or 75,000, some thoughts on how we could use that if we redirect a portion of that 200 to security and then another portion of it to other activities within the district.
So what Josh has been saying, and I think Kirk was talking about too, in terms of a list of things, or how can we work with the business owners and blah, blah, blah. Well, we've been trying, right? I mean, this is the issue here, is that if we say, okay, well, we'll spend more money to beautify, but there's no skin in the game for you, it's like we're just enabling this. Okay, well, the city will deal with it. And I think that's kind of ridiculous, because there's more important things like we're talking about with fire and safety and police, that to focus on beautification at a time where we're lacking those kinds of really critical things, just because people aren't taking the ownership that they should, I think is not right.
That's a fair point. It's hard to do everything well. And it's hard. Obviously there's the core, fire, life, safety, of course. That's the number one. When you compare it, that juxtaposition of beautification, that's becomes a pretty easy argument. But I feel like all of this is a moot point, even if we had a surplus, if left over, unless we address the broken system that we, have inherited, obviously, but that's been the crux of this all. If the system was fixed through the parking situation, ideally, I know there's been some pro formas done. I think we've got some case studies. Obviously, it's political, but there's never a good time to initiate making people pay for parking that they've gotten for free forever. There's never a good time to institute that. But there's some reprieve for building owners, not paying into their parking tax or building, if you own the real estate, or your tenant, same thing. And not everybody has that sense of pride and ownership. It's hard to expect them to clean in the public domain space. But I agree with Genzo. There's obviously more important things, but it's just a distribution of resources. I mean, look how detailed our budget is. There's a line item for everything, including, $90,000 or $110,000 for alley naming project and alley improvements or electric, that it's like, well, we could have, there's all these illustrations you could pick and choose from. But the macro issue is the funding mechanism. And it's almost like you just want to do it. Just go for it. But easier said than done, obviously.
I think one thing that this board could do is, as a part of a budgetary recommendation and acknowledging how the current system is broken, is to ask the council to direct staff to come back at some point in the future. Pick a quarter, maybe it's Q4 of the next year. I don't know what, pick the date. With a recommendation for stabilizing funding for needs within the parking district. And so that could be looking at lifting the cap, or it could be an implementation to paid parking and a transition plan for that.
There's a recommendation. I mean, is that something that we could take a motion on, or is that what's the mechanism there to just go for it? And I mean, again, other input is greatly appreciated, but I feel like we have to.
So Cherie, looking at the fund, the budget committee and the council, of course, are going to, discuss this at a whole nother level tied to the general fund and police support and all of those other needs. But, I think it's within this board's purview in reviewing this budget to make a recommendation that the funding for police be modified to either shift more of it to some needs, whatever you decide, if you want to call it beautification in general, or if you've got some specific focus, which could be more cleaning services, and then the rest of it for security, either through police or other security services. And in conjunction with that, to ask staff to come forward with some sort of stabilization plan that could be implemented within the next 24 months, something along those lines.
Well, the board has, and I gave copies to everyone when we talked about this, I don't know how many meetings back, I refreshed the board's memory on the communications that they have sent to council for several years now just at this time, basically going through what the challenges are, basically hinting at, putting it, it's broken, putting in a paid parking system. So, I don't have any problem drafting. This one would be a little bit different, in that they're basically coming up with some specific kind of recommendations. But, if that's what the board wants to take action on, well, I can come back with something and then you can take action on it. I'll draft something for you to look at the next meeting to see if I've captured, what I think the board would like to message. And if not, then I can always edit it also. But I know I have a lot of new board members, but DAB has each year for several years communicated with council on the parking fund budget and the challenges with it. So I'd be happy to draft something again.
Awesome, Cherie. Any other conversation about this? I mean, it's so incredible.
Curious about the ARPA.
Kirk,
I
Linda.
was curious about so Cherie, you have on there the last 2 years, the ARPA funds. Are those funds that are not going to be available again this year, or is there a portion of it that are available as call it a backstop? Because like you were saying earlier, Sheree, $2,900 is not really much of a slush fund to be having available if something happens. Is there a backstop like it's done the past 2 years, it looks like?
Well, Chris, don't think I didn't ask the exact same question of Kristen. I said, I'm just going to put everything in the budget that we want, and then somebody will backfill it, right, with ARPA funds. Go for it, Kristen. You can tell them what you told me.
Yeah, no, the ARPA funds have all been allocated and expended over the last 2 years. So we have no more ARPA funds.
Can't get blood out of that tomato. It's an excellent
Yeah, thank
question.
you.
It was a perfect question. I wanted more of that money too. So. Yeah,
I noticed
that-
that also there's costs associated with the structures. Is there any money in the $300 million bond that is being allocated to the parking district that could replace some of the funding that we're planning on spending that could be actually bond spending instead?
There is nothing included in the proposed bond right now. Most of our needs are for maintenance and operations, with some capital needs as well. You know, maintenance, capital needs that cross over into maintenance, like painting structures, those sorts of things. And those, a lot of maintenance or operational improvements don't meet the test for a capital bond.
Okay.
Linda,
All
you
I
had
had. Thank you.
before Kurt.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Kirsten, thank you very much. I think, again, it's always helpful to hear the timing explanation. You know, I know you've come forward to DAB with police, you know, having to try to find additional bonds or support for the police. And it is clearly something that needs to happen. So fingers crossed this bond does get passed. And I personally did not recognize some of the political issues that you've explained in the sense of trying to change the parking fund structure that now seems critically timed with other things. So I appreciate you sharing that and helping me understand some of the difficulties as we move forward. I would like to move forward, as you've suggested, have Sheree draft something. I think if for no other reason, we get that information to City Council again so that that money for this downtown doesn't get lost in all the noise. So I think it could be helpful for us just to keep kind of pushing the button and saying, hey, we're here still too. So I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, so Linda, thank you for that. My goal in looking at all of this timing is that, you know, there's work at the staff level that needs to be done to prepare for implementation of a paid system, right? So we can start that work. And we've already started those discussions with staff, you know, so we can start laying that groundwork and preparing for this so that come the fall, then when there's a decision to move forward, if and when that happens in the fall, we're ready. We're ready to get going and to start implementing right away. And the good news is that we can use urban renewal funds to pay for the installation of the system. So that
Yes.
helps us out a lot. We don't have to go to general fund or look for other resources to do that.
Like I said, how long have we been talking about it? But I think having the work behind it, figuring out the best systems and all of that needs to be done so that, as you say, we can move forward. So I think that is an excellent plan.
Can we feel it? Can we feel it? You feel the momentum? Well, we could beat this horse all day. Sheree, anything else? Well, we've got time, well, we do have plenty of time left here. We want to talk about anything on your mind or anyone else?
I don't have, again, these meetings are for you. I'm here to, assist you in any way I can or answer questions with Kristen or Michael if you had them on the budget. But I'll draft a memo and bring that back to you. For our next meeting, we have another meeting at the end of the month to approve, make a recommendation for a parking fund budget. And again, I'll have the memo associated with that that speaks to a little bit stronger a plan that you would like to move forward. And to speak to Kristen's comment about being ready, a couple of us were ready. I mean, we've taken a look multiple times at the costs associated in a timeline with putting a paid system in. It's like it rolls around every so many months. And so it's a little bit more difficult right now because of impacts from COVID. So having a little bit more time to have some history under our belts will make updating that easier. But, if we needed to do it, we could have it in 3 days. I think the other impact would be with all of the shipping and equipment, because these come from Sweden. That might be something that has changed from the last time we ordered equipment, the timeline to get it here. But otherwise, everything's easy to update. So just know that readiness to proceed, we could deliver on that if we needed to. Kristen's kept us, has asked us for that. So it's not like I'd have to start today looking at something that I've never looked at before.
Yeah, you're right about every 6 months.
Yeah, she's consistently asked for that, just in case. Josh, like you said, can you hear it? Every now and then we hear it. And so we're ready. And we talked about it. I touched on it when we talked about the riverfront budget, that, this could be something that we need to keep in the back of our minds that we will be paying for out of riverfront when the time comes. So that wouldn't be a surprise to you because that would be where we would pull the money. And we have sufficient money there to be able to do that. What won't be part of an implementation is, and I'm just going to ask everybody right now to hold this thought, the weeds. So historically, when any of us talk about putting a paid parking system in, we can't just talk about the benefits of putting a paid parking system in. All the questions we get is, will you have 15 minutes free for a coffee shop? Are you going to have 3 hours free? Are you going to be able to validate? Can you get that app where you can add minutes? Are you going to do license plate? Is there going to be a receipt? I would be happy if we could just get it in, because that's all programming. And yes, as a business, you could validate. All of that is possible with the systems. It's just, we go down a rabbit hole immediately about, well, it wouldn't be fair if a coffee shop gets 15 minutes for their customers, but I don't want to talk about that. Let's just get the system in. So I need all of you to help with just the overarching messaging of the benefits of a paid system, not in the programming of a paid system. We could work that out if we ever got it in. So I would just ask for, remember that I said this, that's where people want to go. Right into I need 15 minutes free.
Yeah, I feel like it's got to come from the outside. This is such a level of expertise, this field. I've been doing a little Google searching over here on the side, and it is a whole field, parking. But that's exactly what we did with Streetscape, and we even did that for the broadband study. We brought in a group, but it's such a level of expertise to facilitate this. And again, I kind of want to tie this back into streetscape improvement design. We brought up trash receptacles, and that was excluded from the scope of streetscape design for the better part. I feel like with this new paid system, who knows, maybe there's not fixed stalls at all. Maybe it's all on the phone. But maybe that's, I mean, I would assume you have to have some type of fixed portion. So do we have to dust off the streetscape scope and say, oh, by the way, we need new little parcels in the planters for these units? I mean, there's layers and variables here.
Well, again, the reason why furniture was pulled out of being part of the streetscape design plan was because if it was part of the public process to come up with streetscape, it would have been lost in, I like this color, I want this, and we would never have gotten the streetscape plan approved and through the process. We always knew that once we got the plan approved, we would come back and look at the street furniture. We're also in a historic district, so you can't just go and take everything that you like someplace else. Recycling comes up all the time. Some things are just not acceptable in a historic district.
Right.
So, but again, Rebecca has done quite a bit of research, and I'll be talking to Kristen about what the results of that are. But yes, I think that we could move forward and put new trash cans and stuff into the existing streetscape that we have, and then move it when we get there to do new. It's just, we have to be mindful of, we're in a moment right now where there's a lot of vandalism that's being done. And we don't have any money to address that on new stuff. Are we not already been talking about, we put in the new landscaping and it's been ripped out, dug out, pulled out, used as, so we already know the consequences to new stuff. And we're going to look at how can we work around that and put new stuff in that is more resistant to the types of challenges that we have. But I think we should wait until all the homelessness is taken care of and there's not one more person or one more dog or one more anything. No, we need to do our part as $90 million of private investment is coming in. It has to be, we have to do our part too, which is why streetscape is so important. We need to do our part.
Cherie
And we will.
just said something about how we're in this moment. Over the last 2 years, I don't know how many times she has said this in regard to all of these different impacts. This has been the longest moment in history, the never-ending moment. But to that point, Cherie, we can't keep waiting. We need to move forward, and if we need to adapt and modify and tweak, that's what we need to do. But this moment is not ending anytime soon.
So I guess because we're all just kind of talking about it, but we really don't have any say in this. I mean, we can obviously send this to, but I mean, the conversation's kind of moot here because we're, we don't have the control, right? So what are our actionable items that we can do? I know we just talked about, presenting something again to the counselors. Is there more? Because it seems, we get it. We know that we don't have the money. We have a broken system, all this stuff. What do we do?
So I think as individual board members, having these conversations with your peers and colleagues and networks about the need, because it is, no matter when we do it, it will get political. There will be pushback on and pain points on transitioning from free to a paid system. So education is going to be very important. So starting that, having those conversations, getting that word out. Because a lot of people, they don't know there's a parking tax. They don't understand this. They just know that they can come downtown and park for free. Right. So helping prepare people for an upcoming change.
Great.
And that's going to create resources to address some of the other things that they have, these other concerns, the security, the cleanliness.
Mhm.
There will be a paid system, but there will also be a benefit to them in having this paid system.
Okay, yeah,
So I think
that's why,
that's an important piece of it.
yeah, okay. So I got that, yeah.
Piggybacking a little bit on what Vincenzo was asking about, and obviously being new to the board, Cherie, you've indicated the board or this committee has gone to the council before and said, hey, we've got these problems. It's a broken system, please fix it. Is part of our job here being, and I don't know how hard we push or how specific we are, that in what you're drafting, is it, open-ended, here, city council, here's the problem, please address it? Or are we going to them with a very firm, we believe as a council, the only solution to this long-term is a paid parking district? Is it a matter of being very specific, here's what we recommend, to kind of put that very specific recommendation in front of the council?
Well, the difference between, Scott, what I've done in the past and what I'm going to draft is I've never put in a memo that we're asking council to direct staff to put together a plan to look at parking. But basically, I'm asking council to consider this time around in the budget what we would like to see changed. So the police, I'm going to say we would like to have them consider taking the 200,000 for police and directing it for this and this, security, cleaning, something that you've identified is a high priority. And again, with respect to parking, like Kristen said, you have to have 24 months, we're not going to say we want it next month. I mean, that just wouldn't be right. But the difference is that I've never asked them to direct staff to do a project. Usually those types of things come from counselors kind of back out. And they say, hey, in a perfect world, downtown council would say, hey, we want to direct staff to look at putting together a plan for putting a paid parking system in downtown. So what will happen with this memo is, and again, you've already had conversations with Councilor Stapleton. She may be able to use it and pick up on it and say, hey, I really think this is a great idea. I agree. We need to wait because we have a lot of things. We're in transition, but it could help her. She can do it herself. I know the board has talked to her. In a perfect world, Scott, what's been given back to the board over and over and over again is the reason we have the system we have is because that is what council voted on, because that was the voice for downtown. If you don't like it, then you need to have the voice come in and undo it. So it hasn't been put to the board. It hasn't been directed to the board to do it. It's kind of like, if the downtown businesses, if you guys want it, then you need to come in and tell us you want it, because we put in place what you have, because that's what the petition said people wanted. So it's always better if it comes from the businesses and the property owners versus a board that's going to be looking more like government, you know what I mean, versus coming from the people. It's always better coming from the people. So Kristen's right, the more you talk, and Linda Nishioka is an amazing example of somebody that's constantly talking to the downtown businesses, trying to get what they have to say, and at the same time talking about, what do you think about, we really feel like parking, we're hearing more about paid parking would be great for downtown. And I know a lot of you evangelize that when you have the opportunity, but we have not been directed to move forward a paid parking plan. And as a board, unless you're directed to do it, that isn't the role that you have. And that gets confusing sometimes because we get passionate, but we haven't been directed to do it. But this communication will queue up this again, and hopefully it might come back, right, Kristen? It might come back to staff to take a look at for you. But I can't guarantee that. But it is different from what I've done in the past. Even though I haven't done this yet, it will be different.
Well, it'll be
Anybody
interesting
else?
how this shakes out. So, Cherie, you said that you have the memo for us to, or you can, or would I need to distribute that to the board before our next meeting, or?
Kirk
I'll
has
have
his hand up
something in your
again.
packet.
Guys, Kirk has his hand up again.
Sorry, because my video's not on, I can't like wave at you guys that I want to talk. I apologize. So one of the questions I kind of had too with this, so obviously one path to this is the paid parking, and that seems the highest likelihood of sustaining over time. But the alternative to increasing revenue in the current system is increasing the charges for everything that we do have. Are we, in the current system, are we limited with the amount that you can increase all of our revenues? Or are there opportunities that we can say, well, if you want us to have a sustaining district, we're going to have to significantly increase. I mean, it's not any different than what private businesses have to do sometimes, where you have to increase prices more than the 10 cents, every year kind of thing. So I was curious how the revenue parts as the current system works. Is there opportunity to create a larger increase year over year than what it has been doing?
Well, I'll take that. The initiative petition that was adopted by council, that was a result of the petition. One of the things it did was it capped the amount we could increase the parking tax annually. So you're limited right there. If you looked at last year's memo to council, that was what DAB recommended. One of the things they said, remove that cap, because removal of that cap would allow us to generate more revenue. The parking tax, unlike the EID, which was a tax to a property owner, the parking tax goes to the business. So if a business doesn't pay, what's your recourse? It's not like I can lien their business. If they don't pay and it's a certain amount, you could probably take them to small claims court. So you don't even have the same tools to collect it if somebody chooses not to pay. So that's one of the flaws of the parking district model. So it used to be we could increase that parking tax and have it align more with what the cost of the districts are. And that was taken away when it was capped. So it doesn't matter what the costs are, we're limited to what that can be. Now, with respect to the permits, usually you don't raise the cost for a parking permit unless you have demand for that parking garage, where to raise it makes sense. Like Marion Parkade, it's completely underutilized. So if I tried to increase that permit cost, I would probably lose the parkers that I have there already. I'm not going to decrease it, even though that has come up sometimes. But you really can't. Supply and demand is what motivates increased in cost. And so it's been hard to do that because we have seen a decrease versus an increase in the demand for permits. But our goal was to try to do a little bit each year, $2, because if you go too many years without increasing it and you try to increase it, everybody gets upset because you've now increased it $5, because that's what happened. We increased it $5 and we never heard the end of it because it hadn't been increased for so long. I think the reason why the cap went on the parking tax was that it didn't increase for years and it hovered around $200 and then it bumped to $400. And when it went from the minimum of 200 to 400, I still hear about that. It was such a significant increase, but it had been flat for so long, you have to bite the bullet and do it. And that was what was recommended by the board at that time. So, you know, the board's always been challenged with each year, even their own politics of do we or don't we, knowing that we have shortfalls and we need revenue. So Kirk, I don't know if I answered that exactly how you would like it, but we do look at opportunities to increase revenue, of which we put a pay station in the Muni lot. The initiative petition included an ordinance that says we can't put paid parking on street, which is why to do that, council through the parking task force had to change that, and we would have to change that to put paid parking on street. But it didn't say we couldn't put it in a parking structure or that we couldn't put it in a lot. So we put one in the Muni lot to test. How would it be? What would the community say? It's amazing to me because that lot's always full, even though 2 steps away from it, you have free parking. So it exceeded all of our expectations for generating revenue. Now, we would never put it in a parking garage if you had free on street, because nobody's going to go in and pay when you can park for free on street. A perfect model is you hit the 85% rule on street, you put paid on street, you leave the parking garage is free. If you hit the 85% rule, then you're able to convert the parking garages to paid. If you hit the 85% rule with paid, now you have to think about, do you need more parking garages or what's the next step? We've been at 85% on street ever since 2008. So we have lots of data that back up our demand and our use on street is sufficient to support a paid system. It just goes back to what Kristen said. It's business politics or council politics or a combination of both. But we have the data for sure.
I'm wondering with the memo that you create, maybe this is kind of a question to other board members, their thoughts too, but with this memo that you're creating, do you put in a part of the argument / discussion that if the system is not going to be shifted to paid parking, then to create a working system, here are the other things that we recommend council does: remove the cap and do other elements associated with it that may not be popular and they may not like it, but it's actually showing them we got two systems here, and you got to fix one of them if you want to keep it, or you need to try this new one that seems like it's a good alternative.
Kirk, one of the challenges with lifting the cap, and that could be done, and that it would help revenue some, it's not going to help it significantly, because the loss of those, our 2 big employers, when we lost Nordstrom's and then lost JCPenney's, they paid such a large percentage of the parking tax, that combined with those that aren't paying, you know, the small amounts, accumulation of all the small amounts that at some point go off to collections, but we never really see those funds. even if we lifted the cap, we would have a little bit more in the parking fund, but it's not going to offset things at a significant level or really give us the resources that we need to do the things that I think the board would like to see done.
So Kirk, the big payers in the parking fund are like Kohl's. It would have been Penny's. It was Nordstrom's. The majority of the businesses in downtown pay the minimum tax, which is like $419 a year. So, and that's, again, I won't get on my soapbox, but to think that I could have my employees parking and all my customers parking, and it only cost me $429 a year. I'd have to look. Why don't I just look that up? Okay, let's look it up. I think it might be $429. That's amazing, because if you're out at Willamette Town Center with the sea of parking, I'm sure those leases include whatever the cost would be to that property owner to keep all of that parking available. So the things that we now know are coming in, like the redevelopment project for Nordstrom's, it's housing. It has a very, very little bit of retail on the ground floor. If the Pitts developed, it would have, probably a very little bit of retail. So the future, like Kristen said, we're not going to be able to replace some of the big hitters in the parking fund with some of the new projects that are coming down, because they pay the biggest portion, which is one of the reasons why we saw a hit to the fund, because they closed or went out of business or a bunch of other reasons, which is why we need a model that would be sustainable. So I'm looking here at the minimum. $442.16 a year is what the majority of businesses pay for a parking tax. A year.
Yeah,
For
so that's not a lot of
a
money when you
year to maintain.
start to increase that.
Let's see, we have, so that pays for 1,106 on-street parking spaces and 2,311 spaces in parking structures. I think that's a pretty good deal for a business, $442, 16 cents.
So if you did a 10% increase at that base level for around 300 businesses, you're still looking at less than $15,000 of a revenue increase based on very fast math.
So it sounds like what you're saying is it's broken.
It's
If you would have been around when we did
Kirk just did 2 years
all
of
of the
tech
work
in
for
one
the
meeting.
task force, you would know how broken it is, because we actually took a look at the parking district model and tried to come up with a way to make sense of, if you're this type of business, you need this type of parking demand. And so it would be, and there was no solution looking at it so many different ways, because no matter how you tried to tweak it, it would be too much of an increase for one business type or another business type. And so we just kept circling back to this model just isn't sustainable. And council approved putting in a paid parking system, and then unfortunately had to turn around and undo that by adopting the initiative petition. So in the time I've been here, council twice has approved putting in a paid parking system. How's that working for us? We don't have it.
And I don't know how many employee generations away from when the methodology for the parking tax was created. But there's nobody here on staff that can look at this and figure out how or why or make any sense out of how it was developed.
Oh, he's passed away. We looked at all of that because it doesn't match code.
Yeah.
We could not figure out how they came up with their system when it isn't tied to anything. We spent, I don't know how much time on that and tried to find the original creator of it who was deceased. Of which probably working with this causes all of us eventually to not be on this planet anymore.
Thank you for entertaining my naivety and my
problem.
questions.
So to all the new board members, welcome.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to incentivize parking. My thoughts are not complete here, so just bear with me for a second. So if you raise the rate of permits for parking in the garages, people are going to seek to park on the street, and they're going to play cat and mouse with the enforcement for timing. If we move to paid parking on the street, then people in the garages may stay in the garage, but we probably won't see many, if any, additional permits in the garage. So if there's a shift to paid parking on the street and an incentive put in place to encourage those who still play cat and mouse, an incentive to get a parking permit by potentially a reduced permit fee or a period of, call it coupons for, if you work downtown and you're parking on the street and you don't want to pay for a street, within the next 6 months, if you want to get a permit for one of the garages, it'll cost half price, for example. And maybe that would help spur enough activity to encourage people to sell more permits, discourage people from monkeying around on the street for parking, have the paid parking in place. And then I'm not a proponent of a tax, especially upon small business, but even if there were still a portion of a business tax left in place, maybe not all of it, or maybe the current rate, et cetera, to generate revenue, not just from paid parking, but from encouraging and incentivizing parking permits, paid parking, and business contribution, albeit probably minimal, listening to what a 10% rate increase would be from what Kristen's quick math said. It's not huge. Rounded to $500 a month for a business maximum, what, 442, I think you said, should not theoretically break the bank of a small business in downtown. But those three things together may be able to help stimulate some of those additional funds and encourage parking correctly through multiple different avenues.
So I can give you some history.
Good thoughts.
Our permit cost. So if I was going to park in the Diamond Lot by Pacific Office Automation, monthly rate is $110, and that's uncovered. I think it's $95 by Masonry Grill. Our most expensive permit, and that's in Liberty, is $78 a month. They're 50-ish here in Chemeketa. You can get it for $30 in Marion. You can get it for $20 at Riverfront Park. And, especially during the holidays. And, we've heard, we have minimum wage earners. They can't pay even the $30. They can't pay the $20. So we put in place a $3 daily. So if you only work, 1 day a week, it's only $3 to be in, or we have a part-time rate. It would be right now $15 a day if we had paid on street parking, or $1.50 an hour. That's what it is by the Capitol. So if somebody, needs to be on that on-street space and they want to, pay the $15, that will be a big increase in revenue because the parkades are really affordable. We're so affordable. The expectation though, for what you get for $30, and I think it's just because it's government, is unbelievable, because those are the complaints I get. I have a permit, so I ought to have security. I get a permit, so there should never be a piece of garbage in the parking structure. I got a permit, which means my car should never have a smash and grab, even though I've left my computer in the back seat and all my working tools. Managing that expectation is a really hard piece, because people pay for something and they expect to have something. So if somebody doesn't want to pay on street and they need some kind of an incentive to be in the parking garages, just the cost alone would be an incentive, unless you want to park in a free customer space in a parkade. We will know who you are very quickly.
Mhm.
Enforcement will know who you are. I know every single resident who parks in a parkade, because when I go through at 5 a.m, it's not a customer in somebody's shop, it's a resident that's in a parkade. I know every single mall person that does inventory in the morning, because they park in the free customer parking spaces and I see them walk to the mall and use their proxies to get in. It's pretty easy to know the difference between somebody who should have a permit and somebody who's a customer. But our pricing is very affordable and should be an incentive. But if we had on-street, you would want to get a permit at our permit cost versus pay on-street. Yeah, you would, but we would look at that, Jordan, because we're always looking at, supply and demand, the best way to utilize all of the parking spaces that we have. It's just hard when we haven't been able to put the paid in to do what we know is the right model for us.
Right.
But the rest, we would certainly, as a board, talk about that if we moved forward with something. We would be taking a look at that.
Definitely. I think this is probably in line with the details that were mentioned earlier about how the paid system works. Let's do that on the back end. I think at the current moment, we need to just rip the Band-Aid off and get something in, your memo or something for staff to work on, to just get something in and work on the details. In my mind, saying it backwards, quantity over quality. And I see quantity over time bring in additional revenue based upon correct forecasting models that perhaps staff would be able to produce or have access to. But yeah, in the short term, I definitely think that we need to get something in and get this ball rolling.
Good thoughts, Jordan. I want to be mindful of the time. We've got about a minute and a half here left. We always like to leave on a positive note, but I certainly don't want to go past the time. So rapid fire round. Anything exciting going on in downtown that just has to get on the table?
We got a show this weekend. Come and see it. Support downtown. You love downtown. We love downtown. Look at the baby.
Baby joined. Yes.
Baby joined. Hi.
She has a lot of thoughts on parking too.
She does. You can see.
Yet. We got to change that.
Yeah, come see the show. Thanks, guys.
All right. Well, with that, I know we're going to see each other back here in 2 weeks. And I don't know. I feel good for the first time in a while on this. We're excited to review that memo. And thanks everybody for your patience. It's not always fun to talk about parking, but this is part of our scope. Linda.
I just want to be sure that procedurally, we just say we're tabling everything until next week. Is that correct? Is that what we need to? Because we're not going to make a vote. We wait for the memo.
You don't have approval of parking fund budget on your agenda today.
Okay, thank you.
We had the approval of Riverfront on the agenda today. Next agenda, you will see approval of parking fund budget and a memo.
then we get to see everybody in 2 weeks. That's wonderful.
So am I to understand that there's in person in 2 weeks? Yes?
Oh, I would love to see you in person in 2 weeks, but unfortunately we have this situation.
Yeah, I think we're keeping it on Zoom, Quandary.
Okay, all right. That was my next question.
Hopefully this year we can see each other.
I would think possibly by April, with the mandates changing in March 31st, that might be a possibility of April, but it all depends upon what the city is permitted to do.
Yeah, we are getting closer. Council will take the lead on that. So when city council starts meeting in person again, and a date has not been set for that yet, then we will move it out to boards and commissions.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
All right. See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.